Minnie Pearl's Chicken was a restaurant chain that opened in 1968 and closed around 1973. Thank you for your suggestion. The success of Kentucky Fried Chicken tantalized John J. Hooker, a Nashville attorney in practice with his younger brother Henry. John J. Hooker Jr. was a colorful, energetic, and well-connected Nashville attorney who narrowly lost a Democratic nomination for governor in 1966. As KFC grew and its franchisees and shareholders became wealthy, Hooker and his younger brother and law partner Henry became convinced that there was room for a second fried chicken chain. The partners built their case on two arguments, applying their skills in the courtroom and trying to apply it to a business model. One was that the success of KFC paved the way for such a business, much like Coke had paved the way for Pepsi. The other argument was that there were many medium-sized markets into which KFC had not yet moved into. John Jay called Sarah Colley Cannon, who was at the time a local icon in show business. When she signed on with the Hookers, her onstage character, Minnie Pearl, who wore a hat that dangled a price tag, was a star on the Hee Haw TV show. John Jay asked her if she'd like to get into the chicken business with him. He figured she'd be the alternative to Colonel Sanders, and the public would think it believable that her family had a good fried chicken recipe. Minnie Pearl's fried chicken was built on an idea and money. There was no chicken recipe in this chicken business. Instead, the brothers focused on franchising the idea before even opening up a store. Every store had their own menu and a way of cooking chicken. John Jay and Henry financed their venture by selling stock to other prominent Nashville residents for 50 cents a share and hired a Chicago food laboratory to develop a recipe that was good or better than Kentucky Fried Chicken. They opened their first restaurant, a standalone building in front of its headquarters at 2708 Franklin Road in Nashville, in a location that was in a mediocre location, so when prospective franchisees came to town, they'd figure, if it works here, it will work in my better location. By 1968, the brothers had sold the rights to almost 300 franchise stores and had decided to go public. Stocks rose from $20 to $40.50 a share, even though there were only 5 restaurants in operation. The Hooker brothers had pulled it off, turning an idea into a company worth $64 million. Not soon after, the brothers announced a second chain named after black gospel singer Mahalia Jackson. Before the news had time to settle, they announced they were starting a third chain called Minnie Pearl's Roast Beef. The stock price rose to $56 a share, and by the end of 1968, Minnie Pearl's still had fewer than 40 restaurants open, with none of them making a profit. The brothers' business model called for franchisees to make a down payment on their share of each franchise fee. The brothers retained 49% of each franchise sold and financed the rest with notes. Nevertheless, the entire franchise fee was recorded as income on the day the franchise was sold. The cost of franchises and the company's method of reporting franchise fees in its income statement would eventually come under the fire from the SEC. During Minnie Pearl's first few months of existence, the company sold a single franchise, or the exclusive right to operate a Minnie Pearl's restaurant in a particular region, for $20,000. The company preferred to sell a group of franchises rather than a single franchise in order to raise more money. Franchisees paid 10% of this amount up front and agreed to pay the other 90% later. But Minnie Pearl's Chicken Systems, Inc. reported the entire $20,000 as earnings at the time of the agreement. Not only was this accounting method unusual, Kentucky Fried Chicken did not report franchise fees in this manner. It also burdened Minnie Pearl's with high earnings that it could never repeat. But many company officials, including Henry Hooker, would later defend this practice, claiming that the company's accounting firm instructed him to do it this way. On August 3, 1968, the grand opening of Minnie Pearl's 5 Nashville outlets made the Tennessean's front page. A week later, Minnie Pearl's announced it had earned $2.6 million on revenues of $6.2 million for the first 6 months of the year. Boosted by this news, the stock climbed to $56 a share. By September, the company had sold the rights to 800 restaurants, fewer than 400 of which had actually opened. In October of 1968, Fortune magazine ran an article that sounded a skeptical note for a long-term success of Minnie Pearl's. If the food does not agree with the people who are supposed to patronize all these outlets, then Minnie Pearl's will find itself with a balance sheet full of deserted buildings, the story said. The Nashville media would have no such skepticism for another year. Management knew they could only sell franchises for only so long. Eventually, the focus had to be from selling franchises to approving sites, opening stores, and selling chicken. But by the end of 1968, Minnie Pearl's still had fewer than 40 restaurants open, almost none of which was making a profit. It also had more than 100 under construction and another 300 in some stage of development. With all of the construction plans, real estate acquisitions, equipment distribution, and franchise sales going on, management said there was almost no way to actually figure out how much money was being spent. So what was ownership doing? John J. Hooker was a salesman who had little interest in detail and told his management team to deal with the nuts and bolts of running the company, while he spent all his time and energy coming up with new franchises to sell. In January of 1969, Minnie Pearl's Chicken Systems, Inc. changed its name to Performance Systems, Inc., or PSI, in order to emphasize the idea that it planned to sell more than just chicken. Before long, the company announced it was branching off into 3 new concepts: a daycare chain, an automotive repair chain, and a chain of ice cream stands. Meanwhile, the company's stock price was still so strong that the firm made its first acquisition, a 180-unit hamburger chain based in Florida called Royal Castle. As PSI announced and the daily newspapers reported those grandiose plans, it occurred to the Hooker brothers that there was only one very obvious group of people to whom they could sell franchises. By this time, the 2-year-old company had many of the Hookers' friends rich. As many of them sold stock at an enormous gain, the Hookers convinced some of them to reinvest at least some of those gains in roast beef franchises. The company stated that it lost $5.5 million during the first half of 1969. When the SEC investigated, it noted that the company had lost a whopping $31 million in 1969. The stock fell to a measly 44 cents. The Hookers even attracted their own copycats, and soon franchises named after Al Hirt, Tex Ritter, Johnny Carson, Tennessee Ernie Ford, and other celebrities appeared. But the lack of restaurant experience, both at the top and among the well-vetted franchisees, began to take its toll. Many Minnie Pearl restaurants closed, others were losing money, and the stock price slid. By late summer, over half of the 250 stores the company had managed to open were closed. In 1970, John Jay was planning to run for governor again, so the brothers arranged to sell controlling interest in PSI to National Generation Corporation, a California conglomerate that owned movie theaters, Bantam Books, and insurance companies. At the same time, the SEC launched an investigation of PSI. John Jay claims orders for the investigation came straight from the Nixon White House. No matter what the cause was, the results were disastrous. The SEC confiscated millions of pages of PSI's documents and refused to let the Hookers report their sales or profits. National General reneged on their purchase offer, and both Democrats lost their elections. The PSI stock fell to less than $1, and the company was forced to sell off their assets, such as the burger chain, to pay down debt. Minnie Pearl was embarrassed to have her name attached to this failure. However, she did come out making a profit and selling her stock before the losses started racking up. By 1974, the stock was selling for less than $0.25 a share. The process of selling off all of its major assets took until 1975, after which the company became inactive for 2 years. Thank you for watching. If you like this content, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks.